The sun rose quietly over the city, casting long shadows between crumbling skyscrapers and empty streets. Once a bustling metropolis filled with life, laughter, and daily hustle, now it lay eerily silent, like a ghost town frozen in time. The few people left clung to survival in scattered pockets, hiding from the nightmare that had overtaken the earth. Jake Reynolds stood at the broken window of an abandoned apartment building, eyes scanning the horizon. Once a firefighter known for his courage and calm under pressure, Jake had become something else, one of the few remaining defenders against the relentless tide of creatures that had emerged weeks ago. Creatures that had turned neighbors into monsters. Creatures that no one could explain. The world hadn't ended with a bang but with an unimaginable horror that spread faster than wildfire. No one knew where it had started. Some said it was a virus. Others whispered about experiments gone wrong. But what mattered most now was survival. Jake's radio crackled suddenly, breaking the morning silence. A voice, shaky but determined, came through. "This is Base Alpha. All units report status." "Repeat, all units report status." Jake grabbed his radio and responded, "Reynolds here. Area clear for now, but heard movement near the old hospital. Could be hostiles or worse. Proceeding with caution." The hospital, once a place of healing, was now a fortress of fear. Rumors spread about what lurked inside, creatures that moved with unnatural speed, shadows in the dark, and the occasional scream echoing through the halls. No one wanted to get too close. As Jake prepared his gear, memories flooded his mind. Just weeks ago, he had been attending his daughter's school play. She had smiled at him from the front row, so full of hope. Now, that hope felt fragile, like a candle fighting the wind. Outside, a distant noise made Jake freeze, an unsettling mix of guttural growls and hurried footsteps. The creatures were moving again. He tightened his grip on his makeshift weapon, a reinforced metal pipe fitted with shards of glass, and moved to the door. Every step was careful, every breath measured. He wasn't alone in this fight. Across town, Maya Collins adjusted her backpack and checked her map. A former paramedic, she had joined the resistance early on, using her medical skills to tend to the wounded and keep hope alive. Her team was small but determined. They had a plan, a way to reclaim parts of the city and find supplies. Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Jake, heading to the hospital. "Need backup. Things are getting worse." She took a deep breath and started running. Meanwhile, in the ruins of what was once a shopping mall, a group of survivors gathered around a makeshift fire. Among them was Malik, a former teacher turned reluctant leader. He looked over the faces of weary men and women, some young, some old, but all sharing one goal, to survive and fight back. Malik's voice was steady but urgent. "We can't wait for help. We have to be the heroes of this ruined world. The creatures didn't just take over the earth, they took our future. But they haven't taken our will." The group nodded, their tired eyes shining with a flicker of hope. Back at the hospital, Jake crept through dark hallways, the air thick with decay and silence. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of his eye. He spun around, ready to strike, but it was only a small child, alone and terrified. "Come with me," Jake whispered, his voice soft but firm. "You're safe now." The child's eyes widened, trusting for the first time in days. Outside, Maya arrived just as a group of creatures lunged from the shadows. She fired her makeshift crossbow with precision, sending one crashing down. Jake and Maya exchanged a quick glance. This was only the beginning. The fight for the ruined world had begun. End of Part 1. The hospital corridors stretched before Jake like a maze designed to trap the living. Every corner he turned brought new dangers, a flicker of movement, the distant scraping of claws on tile, and that ever-present, chilling silence that seemed to swallow every sound except for his own heartbeat. Maya was close behind, her breath steady despite the tension. Her eyes darted constantly, searching for threats or signs of survivors. The child they had found clung tightly to Jake's jacket, silent but trembling. "Stay close," Jake whispered, pressing his back against a wall. "We don't know what else is in here." The old hospital was a shell of what it once was. The paint peeled from the walls, and flickering emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows. The faint stench of antiseptic mixed with decay hung heavy in the air. Somewhere deeper in the building, a low growl rumbled, a sound that made their skin crawl. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the end of the hall. Jake raised his weapon, signaling Maya to take cover. From the darkness emerged a creature, its skin pale and stretched tight over sharp bones. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, eyes glowing faintly red. Jake swung his pipe with force, the shards of glass scraping across the creature's arm. It hissed and lunged, but Maya fired her crossbow, the bolt piercing its shoulder. The creature stumbled, letting out a terrible cry before collapsing to the floor, motionless. The brief victory was a small spark in the suffocating gloom. But Jake knew there were more like it waiting. "We need to get to the supply room," Maya said, consulting the map she had memorized. "There might be food, medical supplies, anything to help the others." As they moved cautiously through the maze of hallways, Jake's radio crackled again. Malik's voice was tense but controlled. "We've got a problem. The creatures are swarming the northern safe zone. We need reinforcements and fast." Jake's stomach tightened. The safe zone was where many survivors had gathered, the fragile heart of their resistance. If that fell, hope might crumble with it. "On our way," Jake replied, gripping the pipe tighter. Outside the hospital, the city was changing. Shadows lengthened, and the once familiar streets twisted into unfamiliar battlegrounds. Groups of creatures roamed with increasing confidence, their numbers swelling like a rising tide. Survivors moved like ghosts, slipping between broken cars and debris, always watching, always wary. Maya and Jake finally reached the supply room, only to find the door forced open. Inside, overturned shelves scattered cans and medical kits across the floor. Signs of struggle were everywhere. "Looks like we're not the only ones who got here," Maya muttered. Suddenly, from the shadows behind a toppled cabinet, a figure emerged, dirty, thin, but alive. It was Sarah, a nurse who had been missing since the outbreak began. "Thank God," Maya breathed. "We thought you were gone." Sarah's eyes flicked nervously toward the door. "They're coming. More of them. And they're smart, too smart for creatures." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Sarah swallowed hard. They seem to hunt in packs. They watch us. Learn from us. I've seen them set traps, wait for survivors to come to them." A cold realization settled over Jake. This was no mindless attack anymore. The creatures were evolving. Adapting. "We have to warn Malik," Jake said urgently. But as they prepared to leave, the hospital's emergency lights flickered and then died completely, plunging the hallway into total darkness. A chorus of guttural growls rose from the shadows, an approaching horde. Jake's grip tightened. "Move! Now!" They sprinted through the darkened corridors, guided only by the faint glow from Maya's phone. The child's frightened sobs echoed behind them. Outside, Malik and the survivors fortified the safe zone with whatever they could find, boards, metal scraps, and sheer willpower. The group worked silently but swiftly, aware that each passing moment could bring the creatures closer. Malik's eyes scanned the horizon as the sun dipped below the ruined skyline. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, were the glowing red eyes of the advancing horde. He clenched his fists. "We don't just survive. We fight. And we fight to win." As Jake, Maya, and Sarah burst out of the hospital's back entrance, they found themselves face to face with the growing swarm. The battle for the ruined world had truly begun. End of Part 2. Part 3, The Siege begins. The night air was thick with tension as the survivors prepared for the inevitable. Malik stood atop a rusted vehicle, barking orders to a ragtag group of men and women who had become something far beyond ordinary civilians. They were warriors now, the last hope of humanity. Jake, Maya, and Sarah had arrived just as the first wave of creatures neared the barricades. The survivors hastily took positions, gripping whatever weapons they could find, baseball bats, hunting rifles, even makeshift spears. Hold the line. Malik shouted. If we break here, there's no going back. From the shadows, the creatures advanced, their eerie, glowing eyes piercing the darkness. Their movements were unnervingly coordinated, almost tactical. It was clear these were no ordinary zombies. Something had changed them, made them more dangerous. Jake took a deep breath, steadying himself as a figure darted forward through the chaos. It was a young woman, her face smeared with dirt and determination. She handed him a rifle, whispering, "We've got your back." The first clashes were brutal. Creatures lunged, snarling and snapping jaws, but the survivors met them with ferocity born of desperation. Bullets ripped through the night, wood cracked as bats swung against gnashing teeth, and the air filled with cries of pain and defiance. Maya's crossbow sang repeatedly, each bolt finding its mark. She moved with a fierce grace, covering the survivors as they fought to keep the creatures at bay. But the horde was relentless. A massive creature, larger and faster than the others, broke through a weak point in the barricade. It roared, a chilling sound that sent a wave of panic through the defenders. Jake met it head-on, swinging his pipe with all his might. The pipe shattered against the creature's tough hide, and Jake stumbled back, heart pounding. The beast lunged, jaws snapping inches from his face. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed, a rifle shot. The creature howled and collapsed. Malik appeared, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "We're not done yet." The fight dragged on for hours. Fatigue set in, but no one faltered. The survivors fought not just for themselves, but for everyone who had been lost to this nightmare. As dawn approached, the horde finally began to retreat, slipping back into the shadows from which they came. The survivors counted their wounds, but their spirit remained unbroken. "We won this battle," Malik said, voice hoarse but resolute. "But the war isn't over." Jake looked out over the battered group, faces marked by fear and determination. In that moment, he knew what they truly were, heroes of a ruined world, fighting back against the darkness with every breath they had left. Would you like me to continue with part 4? The morning sun rose weakly over the shattered cityscape, casting pale, uncertain light over the battered safe zone that had become home to the last band of survivors. Dust hung in the air like a lingering ghost, and the distant wails of creatures reminded everyone just how fragile their peace was. The barricades, though bloodied and dented from the previous night's siege, still stood, a testament to the survivors' grit and sheer will to live. Jake Reynolds sat on the cracked concrete beside a small fire, wiping the grime and sweat from his face. His muscles ached, but there was no time to rest. He knew that survival required more than just fighting off the creatures, it required resources, planning, and allies. Malik, the grizzled leader of the safe zone, approached with heavy steps, his face etched with concern. "We're running low on supplies," Malik said quietly but firmly. "Ammo, food, medicine, whatever we have won tonight won't last much longer." Jake nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the city's ruins stretched endlessly. "We need to send a team to the outpost on the west side. If the rumors are true, there's still stockpiles there." Maya Collins, her crossbow slung over her shoulder, leaned forward. "But that outpost is deep in creature territory. It's a suicide mission." Sarah, the nurse who had joined them recently, added, "We can't survive by staying here, waiting to be overrun. If we don't act, this place will fall. We need to find other survivors. Maybe they can help." Malik rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "Strength in numbers. It's the only way. But trust is a luxury we don't have anymore." The decision was made quickly. Jake would lead a small group to the outpost, bringing Maya and Sarah along. They would move swiftly, avoiding unnecessary confrontations, and bring back what they could. Malik insisted they take extra weapons and survival gear, handing Jake a weathered but reliable rifle. "Stay sharp," Malik warned, his voice low but intense. "And trust no one outside this zone." The trio set out as the city awoke to another day of danger. The streets were silent except for the crunch of broken glass beneath their boots. Buildings, once proud symbols of civilization, now stood like hollowed tombs. The weight of the apocalypse pressed down on them with every step. Maya's eyes constantly scanned the shadows. I don't like this silence. It's the calm before the storm. As they moved deeper into the ruins, Jake's radio crackled softly with updates from Malik, but the signal was weak. Communication was unreliable in this dead world. Suddenly, movement flickered across the street. Figures stepped out from behind a crumbled wall, 5 people, all armed, faces wary and tense. Their weapons were crude but effective, hunting knives, pistols with few bullets, and one carried a crossbow. Jake raised his hands slowly, palms open, signaling peace. We're survivors, he said cautiously. We're not here to fight. The strangers exchanged uneasy glances. The tallest among them, a woman with sharp eyes and a hardened expression, stepped forward. We've been watching your group. We want peace. We want to fight back together. Her words were cautious but hopeful. Maya lowered her crossbow slightly but kept her finger on the trigger. How do we know we can trust you? The woman's gaze hardened. You don't. But if we don't try, we all die alone. Sarah nodded. It's a risk we have to take. After tense moments, Jake gestured for the strangers to join them. As they merged into one group, the air between them was thick with suspicion, but also a fragile hope. This was a chance, however slim, to rebuild some semblance of community. The combined group shared what little they knew. The creatures had been evolving, becoming smarter, more coordinated. There were whispers of packs that set traps, of creatures that seemed to stalk their prey with cunning. The city was a battlefield, but pockets of resistance still existed, scattered across the ruins. As they journeyed toward the outpost, the survivors moved cautiously. Every corner could hide death. Every shadow might conceal the undead. The city was silent but alive with menace. Along the way, the new allies revealed bits of their past. The woman who had approached them was named Lena, a former firefighter who had lost everything but her will to fight. Another, a man named Paul, was once a mechanic and had crafted several makeshift weapons from scrap. Stories of loss, survival, and determination wove a fragile bond between the strangers. They shared rations, helped each other over rubble, and stood watch during brief rest stops. But beneath their growing camaraderie lay an uneasy truth: trust in this new world was as dangerous as the creatures themselves. The slightest betrayal could mean death. One night, as the group camped in the hollowed-out shell of an old bookstore, shadows flickered beyond the broken windows. A low growl rolled in from the streets, and the survivors tensed, gripping their weapons. Suddenly, a figure burst into the room, breath ragged, eyes wild with fear. They're coming. More than before. They're hunting us. Jake stood slowly, weapon ready. We need to move. Now. The alliance, born of desperation and hope, was about to be tested in ways none of them could imagine. In the ruins of a world lost to darkness, heroes were rising. But the path forward was perilous, and survival meant fighting not only the creatures outside but the fears and shadows within. Would you like me to continue with Part 5 next? The city around them was a broken skeleton, hollowed out by chaos and abandonment. Every step Jake and his team took was measured and cautious, as though the crumbling streets themselves could betray them. The weight of the ruined world pressed down with an almost physical force, muffling their breath and sharpening their nerves. Jake's heart hammered inside his chest, but his face betrayed nothing. The outpost, their destination, was supposed to be a lifeline. A beacon of hope in a city drowned in despair. Rumors had circulated among survivors that the military had managed to stash supplies there before the fall. Weapons, food, medicine, things that could turn the tide for their fragile group. But none of that mattered if they didn't make it there alive. Keep close, Lena whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Her eyes flicked from shadow to shadow. The creatures are hunting. We're not just walking through ruins, we're walking into a trap. Maya, ever vigilant, scanned the empty streets with her crossbow ready. Something's wrong. Too quiet. Too empty. Sarah's fingers tightened around the makeshift knife she carried, her breath shallow but steady. We've come too far to turn back now. As they approached an intersection near the outpost, a sudden noise sliced through the silence, the unmistakable, guttural growl of creatures on the hunt. From behind a broken-down car, several creatures emerged. Their eyes glowed with a chilling intelligence, a haunting evolution beyond mindless monsters. They moved deliberately, closing in with unnerving speed. "Get ready!" Jake hissed, raising his rifle. The survivors scrambled into a defensive formation. Maya's crossbow twanged as her first bolt found its mark, dropping one of the creatures with a sickening thud. But others closed the gap swiftly. One lunged at Maya, teeth bared. She twisted, swinging a heavy pipe she'd picked up, smashing it hard across the creature's head. It staggered, snarled, then fell limp. Sarah fought back-to-back with Malik's second in command, her knife flashing in the grim morning light. Her heart pounded not just from the fight, but from the stakes. This was their future, their only hope. Jake fired steadily, conserving ammo but not hesitating when a clear shot presented itself. The creatures snarled and circled, relentless and terrifying. The air was thick with the sounds of battle, growls, shouts, the metallic clang of weapons meeting flesh. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed from the deeper shadows of the city, reverberating off the ruined walls. The creatures froze, their heads snapping toward the sound. Then, almost as one, they retreated, slipping back into the darkness. "That wasn't just an animal," Lena muttered grimly. "They're organized. Someone, or something, is leading them." Jake's mind raced. If the creatures were evolving, coordinating, it meant their enemy was becoming more dangerous than ever before. This was no longer a random apocalypse. It was a war. "We don't have time to dwell," Jake said. "The outpost is just ahead." The barricaded doors loomed before them, scarred and battered but still standing firm. Jake pushed against the heavy metal. It groaned but gave way. Inside, the air was stale but safe, and the faint glow of emergency lights illuminated stacks of crates and supplies. "Medicines," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide as she hurried to open a crate. "Food. Weapons." For a moment, hope flickered. They moved quickly, grabbing what they could: ammo boxes, canned goods, first aid kits. Every item was a lifeline in this dead world. Then came the pounding. A deep, heavy thud that rattled the walls and shook the floor. The creatures outside had found them, and they weren't going to give up. Lena hurried to barricade the doors, piling crates and debris as Jake scanned the windows. Shadows flickered just beyond the glass, too many to count. "Brace yourselves," Jake said, his voice steady but grim. "This is going to get ugly." The creatures slammed against the barricades, their snarls echoing like thunder. The survivors formed a tight circle, weapons ready, adrenaline surging through their veins. "Hold the line!" Jake shouted. "Don't let them in." The first impact shattered the weakened wood. A creature's claw reached through the broken frame, grasping for Sarah. Maya shot it cleanly, but the battle was far from over. Inside the outpost, every moment was a fight for survival. The creatures battered, scratched, and clawed, testing the survivors' resolve. The air grew thick with dust and desperation. Malik's voice crackled faintly through the radio. "How's it looking, Jake?" "Under siege," Jake replied, teeth clenched. "But we're holding." Minutes stretched into hours. Every breath was a gamble, every heartbeat a reminder of the thin line between life and death. Then, just as suddenly as the siege began, the creatures pulled back, retreating into the darkness once more. The survivors slumped in exhaustion, their bodies aching but spirits unbroken. Jake looked at his team, wounded, weary, but alive. "We got what we came for," he said quietly. "Now we get back. We warn the others. We prepare." Because the war was far from over. The creatures were growing smarter, more coordinated, and the fight for the ruined world was only just beginning. Would you like me to continue with part 6? The sun dipped lower behind the shattered skyline, casting long, eerie shadows over the ruined city. Inside the battered outpost, the survivors moved cautiously, every creak and whisper setting nerves on edge. The temporary reprieve from the siege gave them a chance to regroup, but danger still lurked closer than they realized. Jake surveyed his team, noting the exhaustion etched into their faces. "We need to move out before nightfall," he said firmly. "The longer we stay, the greater the risk." Lena nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. "I agree. But we can't just run blindly. The creatures will be back, and they're learning." Maya checked her crossbow again, the weight of her decisions heavy on her. "And there's something else," she added quietly, glancing around the dim room. "I'm not sure we're the only ones watching." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "While scavenging the supplies, I found signs. Footprints. Not from the creatures. Someone else is here, or was. And they're not friendly." Malik's radio crackled, breaking the tension. "Jake, we're picking up something on the comms. Movement near the east block. Could be survivors, or enemies." Jake's heart skipped. "Everyone, gear up. We're moving out. Stay sharp. And trust no one." Outside, the city was a dark maze of abandoned cars, fallen street lamps, and silent buildings. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner hiding unseen threats. As they advanced toward the east block, a flicker of movement caught Lena's eye. She motioned sharply for silence, and the group froze. From behind a crumbled wall stepped a figure, dirty, ragged, but unmistakably human. Relief flooded the group, but it was tempered by caution. "Who are you?" Jake demanded, rifle trained on the stranger. The figure raised hands slowly. "Name's Elias. I've been watching you. We want the same thing, survival." Maya's eyes searched his face. "Why haven't you made contact before?" Elias hesitated. "Trust is scarce. And some of us don't want this fight to end." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Elias's voice dropped. "There's a faction in this city, working with the creatures. They see the apocalypse as a chance to rebuild, on their terms. Anyone who stands in their way, doesn't last." A chill ran through the group. The war wasn't just against the creatures anymore, it was against humans who had embraced darkness. Suddenly, gunshots echoed nearby. The group dropped low, weapons ready. "Ambush!" Malik shouted over the radio. Multiple contacts, armed and dangerous. The survivors scrambled for cover as shadows moved with deadly precision. Bullets zipped through the air, forcing Jake and his team into a fierce firefight. Lena returned fire, her aim steady despite the chaos. "They're trying to pin us down. We can't let them split us up." Jake barked orders, coordinating their defense. But the enemy was ruthless, pushing harder with every volley. Amid the chaos, Elias disappeared into the shadows, leaving more questions than answers. The firefight raged, every second a battle for survival. Just when hope seemed to flicker, a sudden explosion rocked the street, sending debris and dust into the air. "Fall back," Jake ordered. "Regroup at the outpost." The survivors retreated under heavy fire, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Back inside the outpost, the wounds went beyond the physical. Trust had been shattered. Elias's warning hung heavy in the air, there were enemies closer than any creature. Jake looked around at his team, the weight of leadership pressing down harder than ever. "This isn't just a fight for survival," he said quietly. "It's a fight for the soul of this world." The night closed in, thick with uncertainty and danger. The battle for the ruined world had become a battle between light and shadow, and the heroes would need every ounce of courage to face what came next. Would you like me to continue with Part 7? The dawn broke over a city scarred by devastation, its ruins bathed in pale, fragile light. Yet the fragile calm of the morning belied the storm of threats closing in around Jake and his team. Trust had fractured within their ranks, and the invisible enemy, one wearing human faces, cast a longer shadow than any creature. Inside the outpost, Jake gathered his group around a battered table littered with maps and radio equipment. The weight of Elias's warning lingered heavily in the stale air. "We can't ignore what he said," Jake began, his voice low but commanding. "There's a faction operating in the city, humans who've chosen to side with the creatures or use the chaos for their own gain." Lena's eyes darkened. "They're no longer just surviving. They're hunting us." Malik grunted, checking his weapons. "That means we're dealing with two wars, against the monsters, and against those who've lost their humanity." Sarah's gaze flicked toward the cracked window, where faint movements suggested the city was still watching. "We have to root them out before they root us out." Maya's fingers brushed over her crossbow. "But how do we fight shadows?" The answer came suddenly. Elias, who had reappeared without warning, stepped into the room. His presence was unsettling, his eyes sharp, his posture guarded. "I know where their base is," he said quietly. "A former government bunker beneath the old subway tunnels. They've been using it to gather forces and plan attacks." Jake studied Elias. "Why help us now?" Elias's face was grim. "Because I'm tired of the lies and bloodshed. Because if they win, there won't be any survivors left, only their twisted rule." After a tense moment, Jake nodded. "Then it's time to end this." We hit their base at first light. The group spent the rest of the day preparing, each member steeling themselves for the mission ahead. The air was thick with tension, every sound, every shadow was a reminder that danger lurked both outside and within. As night fell, Jake found a quiet moment alone, staring out at the broken city. The ruins whispered stories of loss and betrayal, of dreams shattered and lives broken. He thought of the friends they'd lost, the sacrifices made, and the price of hope in a world gone mad. "We fight not just to survive," he whispered, "but to reclaim our world." At dawn, they moved out, shadows among shadows. The entrance to the old subway tunnels yawned before them like the mouth of a beast, dark and foreboding. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, the silence oppressive. Every step echoed, every breath a reminder of the peril beneath the city. They navigated the maze of tunnels, alert for traps or ambushes. Time seemed to stretch, the weight of anticipation heavy on their shoulders. Then, ahead, faint lights flickered, a hidden base carved into the concrete. Jake signaled the team to halt. "This is it," he said softly. "Stay sharp." With weapons ready, they moved forward. The base was alive with movement, figures armed and alert, their faces hardened by cruelty and desperation. A fierce firefight erupted, echoing through the tunnels. Bullets flew, shouts rang out, and the claustrophobic space turned into a battleground. Lena took cover behind a pillar, firing steadily to hold the enemy at bay. Malik charged forward, his brute strength clearing a path through the chaos. Sarah and Maya flanked the perimeter, their precise shots picking off foes before they could close in. Jake pressed toward the heart of the base, driven by the urgency to end the threat once and for all. Inside the command center, a chilling sight awaited, the faction's leader, a ruthless figure who wore a twisted grin like a badge of honor. "So, the heroes come to die," the leader sneered. Jake raised his rifle. "This ends now." The leader laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think this world will ever be yours again? It's ours. We have the creatures, the power, and the will to survive at any cost." But Jake was not afraid. With a steady hand and a clear purpose, he pressed the trigger. The battle was brutal and swift. The faction's forces crumbled under the survivors' determination and skill. One by one, the enemy fell, their plans shattered like the city above. As silence finally settled over the tunnels, Jake looked around at his weary but victorious team. "We've won a battle," he said, voice heavy but resolute. "But the war for this world is far from over." Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting light over the ruins and the heroes who fought to save them. In the shadows, unseen eyes watched, and the fight would continue. "Would you like me to prepare Part 8, the final part, or any changes to the style or focus?" The morning light filtered softly through the cracked windows of the outpost, casting a pale glow on the faces of the survivors. Outside, the city seemed momentarily at peace, but Jake knew better than to trust appearances. The battle they had just fought beneath the city was only one chapter in a far larger story, and the true challenge was only beginning. Jake stood among his team, their weapons resting but their eyes sharp and wary. Each person carried the scars of the fight, not just physical, but the deeper wounds left by betrayal, loss, and the heavy burden of leadership. "We've taken down the faction," Jake said, voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. "Their grip on the city is broken. But we can't let our guard down. There are still creatures out there. There are still dangers within our own kind." Lena nodded, her gaze distant but resolute. "We fought shadows and monsters alike. Now we have to rebuild trust, with each other, and with the survivors scattered across this broken world." Malik stepped forward, his usual bravado tempered by the weight of recent events. "We've seen what happens when people give in to fear and selfishness. But there's still hope, if we stand together." Sarah, ever the strategist, spread out a worn map on the table. "Our next move has to be about finding others like us. Survivors who want to fight, who want to rebuild. We need to unite these scattered pockets, or the darkness will swallow us all." Maya, quiet but fierce, glanced toward the horizon where the city met the wild outskirts. "And we need to find new shelter, new strongholds. Places the creatures and hostile humans won't find so easily." The group fell into a determined silence, the weight of their mission clear but not impossible. Jake looked at each of them, his team, his family, and felt a surge of hope. Over the following days, they fortified their outpost, salvaging supplies, and setting up defenses. But the true work was outreach, sending scouts and radio messages into the unknown, searching for other survivors ready to join the fight. Their radio crackled one night, faint but unmistakable, a voice from miles away. A group of survivors, trapped but unbroken, calling for help. "Coordinates coming through," Sarah said, heart pounding. "It's a chance to grow our strength." Jake grinned, a rare moment of relief breaking through. "Prepare to move out. This is what we've been fighting for." The journey to the new survivors was perilous, crossing ruined highways and shadowed forests where danger still prowled. But the group moved with purpose, every step a testament to their will to survive. They found the survivors holed up in an old factory, weary but alive, their spirits rekindled by the arrival of allies. Together, they forged plans not just for defense but for a future, one where the ruined world might one day heal. As the sun set over the broken horizon, Jake stood outside the factory, looking at the faces illuminated by flickering campfires. "We may not have saved the world yet," he said softly, "but we've taken the first step toward something better. A world where hope outshines fear." Lena joined him, her eyes reflecting the firelight and something deeper. "We're not just fighting creatures," she said. "We're fighting for humanity. For everything worth saving." Jake nodded. "And as long as we stand together, as long as we fight, we will never be defeated." But even as the survivors celebrated, unseen eyes watched from the darkness beyond the camp's glow. The creatures still roamed, evolving, learning. And somewhere in the shadows, new threats stirred, humans who had not lost their hunger for power, willing to do anything to claim what was left of the world. The fight was far from over. Yet for the first time in a long while, the heroes of the ruined world dared to believe in a dawn beyond the apocalypse. The end, for now. Would you like me to help with anything else, perhaps a summary, potential sequel ideas, or a different story?